Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a first time for all of us, I think, together. We've got Cliff Hive, got Bix Weir, got myself, Joe, Jason, and four. We decided a little while back, let's have like a little, what'd you call it in your video, Bix? Round table or something?
A round table or a threesome.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure which I call it.
I call it a rondori. Okay, that's a term from the martial arts. A rondori is where one person has to defend themselves from many people rushing at them, and there's
Oh,
just
bring
the
it on.
coolest thing. Oh, you go to Aikido, you work for an hour and a half. Everybody's exhausted, but the ki levels are just pumping like mad, and you're sweating like mad. And then each person in turn gets up and faces two lines or three lines coming at you from various different angles, and you just stand there flipping people right and left any particular way you can until everybody's so exhausted you lie around like dogs panting in the sun. It's really cool.
Sounds like one of the VR games that I play, where all these zombies and stuff are coming out. You're just standing there with the controllers slicing, and but that's fake.
Well, and you feel like a zombie by that point in Aikido, you know.
Yeah.
But no, I think of it as a rondori, you know, which is the multiple approach. Yeah.
So look, I mean, both Bix and I, we're constantly reading your reports. We're getting your Bitcoin reports. I mean, I've got people emailing me. Sometimes it's kind of a smaller hey, web hit, check this out, And I'm like, yeah, that's actually true, but it's like I feel like these days, like it's not big enough for me to do a video on. Thanks for telling me, but I need a bigger fish to fry. I want to show people like this is a webbot hit. Like you talk about these, the Bitcoins and the Ethereum, and I was telling my neighbor friend, he's into it. I helped him set up an account, and he's good to go. We're texting and eating lunch every now and then. We'll meet up. He's all excited, but I was telling him, I was like, I remember earlier this year, we're only in June now, but just January, what was it, $20 roughly for an Ethereum? And I'm like, I remember going into my Coinbase account, and I was sitting there, and I was like, okay, place the order, and I was just about to click the button, like, let me buy some of these. And I was just sitting there with my mouse. I'm like, yeah, I could, but I kind of want Bitcoin, And I couldn't make my mind up. And then I just got busy doing something else. Never made the order. Matter of fact, didn't even put any of that money into the Bitcoin at the time. I just totally left it alone. And here I am, with today 250 roughly 249 dollars for an Ethereum coin right now. Thinking, man, once again, man, if I got in earlier. And people, when it was $20, are saying the same thing when it was pennies and $1 and $2. And every time someone says, well, it's not going to keep going, that's it. That's the run up. It keeps going. It keeps going.
I had the exact same thing. You know what gave me confidence to really go? I mean, I learned about it. I first tried about it, I think, from Cliff or Jeff Berwick. But then I learned about it, but I didn't really have confidence. Confidence to make a significant investment and then just hold it through all the insanity and all the times they've announced Bitcoin has died until Cliff's reports. I mean, really, it gives you a kind of confidence that knowing no matter what happens, in Cliff's data, 10 years, 20 years out, there's Bitcoin's in there and Ethereum's in there. So in some way, people can be talking about it. And it really did give me confidence to go more all in than I already was, which, I mean, obviously it's done extremely well so far.
And you played the Ripple one, didn't you?
I see, that's the only one I didn't like, because that was when you got to get in and get out. And, you're worried about it when you get in, you're worried about it when you get out.
Yep.
I was more... My base core investment was Bitcoin, but then Ethereum I went even bigger in, and I just plan on sitting and waiting. I'll jump into little things like I don't want to say the names because it's gonna, every time I say a name it jumps up or down or whatever. But Bitcoin and Ethereum definitely. I got into the one you were talking about, Joe, that hasn't been traded yet on the regular market, because I understand that. I understand how that can be used when these exchanges are falling apart. I'll say it. It's Veritasium.
Yeah.
And it's VER, not VERI. People get confused. It's the VER coin. But when the exchanges are starting to fall apart, it's a technology that can be used in place of the comics, in place of LBMA. I think that's really exciting when that comes out, that it's going to be used for something. And those are the coins I look for.
Well, let me tell you my Ethereum story, and then remind me about the Veritasium thing, because it's really cool, and I've been following that with some interest. But about maybe 18 months ago, so long ago that I don't remember exactly when it when it was, I needed some Ethereum. And I'd set up a wallet a long time ago, and I had one Ethereum because I wanted to play on the platform, okay? Not because I wanted to speculate, and you need an Ethereum to buy into it. And so I thought, well, then I read into it. I discovered how cool it was. This was about 18 months ago. Things got interesting in our lives. It was actually probably a little longer than that. And because of the way reading about the code that you had to develop for Ethereum, I started thinking about my own code differently, and that led to being able to isolate some of the language, which led us to the level of predictions that we've had that have been accurate with Bitcoin and some of these others. So I actually tweaked my own code after examining how they were going to do Ethereum, because it pointed out to me how people would be reacting to everything with specific language. And so that was about the time that Bitcoin was like in 250, and I came out with the forecast that it was going to go through 408.28 and do this 3 times. And so and it didn't make any sense at the time, but I said, well, what the hell, I can say it, I'm wrong about silver, so it won't make any difference, right? And sure enough, it did it. It rotated through the 408 to 428 3 times. But anyway, so I'd bought some. At that point, I knew that, this a long time ago, like I say, Bitcoin was about 250, maybe it was 18 months or more ago. And I knew I needed some Ethereum for some coding I wanted to do on the Ethereum blockchain, on their rails, I think of it. And so I went and I bought some. I took a whole Bitcoin and I converted it to a bunch of Ethereum at the time. And then, as I say, because I'd been reading about it, it took some time for that transaction to confirm. And in fact, it never has. I've never actually claimed all those Ethereum because I got distracted in my own code and never fired up my wallet again, because my wallet is not just a regular Ethereum wallet, it's what's known as a full node. And so I'm running a missed full node. And so at the moment, I'm still trying to get that thing to reconnect, because it's got to download the whole blockchain, not only Bitcoin blockchain, but it's got to go through all of the Ethereum blockchain. And so it's got a lot of processing to do because it's 18 months out of date. Somewhere in there's a transaction that records my converting 1 Bitcoin to some Ethereum. And I think I've got 1,100 of the buggers. Okay, I think that there were 1,100 to 1 at the time I converted the Bitcoin to Ethereum. Now, it was because I needed the Ethereum because of the gas price at the time. Not gasoline, but gas in the Ethereum virtual machine.
Yeah.
And so like I say, I've either got 1,100 of them or I've lost 1,100 and will be claiming that as a casualty loss on my taxes. But anyway, so that's my Ethereum story, is that I've got at least one of them because my wallet actually records that one, and then later on I converted a bunch of Bitcoin or a Bitcoin. So maybe I've got more than that, and I actually need more than that because I've got some cool ideas on software to write to run on the Ethereum network, which brings me back to Veritasium and Reggie Middleton. People don't understand what they've got with these with the Ver coins, right? With Reggie's Veritasium coin. Veritasium, the word, actually is like Wujo. Okay, if you look at it, it's Latin for place of truth or price discovery. So his whole focus is on price discovery, and so what he's actually engineering is twofold. He's got a crew, and part of his crew is techie guys that are writing code that will be self-replicating robot templates that are on Ethereum's network. And then the other part of his crew are analysts that are going to go out and analyze to start cryptocurrencies. Kind of sort of like my reports, only they're going to do it where they're going to figure the market cap and the weighted averages and the moving averages and all this kind of crap. And they're going to put all that stuff into machine code and make it available to these robots. And so you guys that own Veritasium coin, I don't have any, by the way. I can't get involved with this stuff if I'm also going to look at the data for it, because then I might be interpreting it against my emotional bias. And so I don't own any of the altcoins that I look
Well, I'm going to buy you a beer on that one.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay. Anyway, though, so the Veritasium coin thing, you have no idea how cool this is, because look, every single corporation on the planet at some point that has any interest in Reggie Middleton's research and his automated robots will want to participate, and there's only 100 million of these coins. They're holding a huge amount in reserve. The ones you've got could actually be rented out, because here's the concept. You in order to get into his robots, you need one of these Veritasium coins. You give it to the robot, and then you provide that robot with Ether coins. the robot converts the ether coins into gas to join into the Ethereum virtual machine and get its processing going. But then it also converts your ether coins to whatever the robot says is the hot pick of the moment in the cryptos, based on all of this really cool research that it's been getting fed to it in bytecode format from Reggie's other machine, which is the analysis machine. And so it's able to know, okay, with all of these heuristic, all these rules, this currency is going to go up, that one's going to go down. We need to sell this now and get this in here. And it uses the Ethereum that you and I and a bunch of other people put into it to power its buying and selling engine. And then at the end of the quarter, every quarter, you can have the option of canceling the contract and pulling your stuff out in Ether or whatever. So get this. If you had that Veritasium, which is the required buy-in, it's the ante. Without that chip, you can't get any of these robots' attention. And so you've got that Veritasium thing, and a big-ass corporation comes to you, a local tire retailer that's got 30 stores or whatever, and he wants to do some trading. But all the Veritasium coins are taken up, but he knows you've got one. And so he proposes that he puts in the Ethereum, and you put up the Veritasium, and you split the rewards at the end of the next quarter. In essence, you've rented him that Veritasium slot to get access to these robots.
It's like a bank. You're a bank. You just earn
exactly.
interest.
Well, you're also you have skin in the game, okay? Because you don't get that Veritasium token back, right? But as long as you've bought into that robot and it's been fed that ether, it'll continually work off of its profits until you draw them out every quarter. So if this guy was really good, if you had a really good robot there and he was cranking away like mad, you might be able to come into that robot every 4 months, every 6 months, and take out big chunks of money, and it would still make more over the next 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, and you take more out. So these things are perpetual, and they could even grow. The amount of heuristics you can get into the Ethereum virtual machine is very limited at one level, but it's unlimited at another level if you know how to do stack programming. Okay, it's not a register machine like a regular computer; it's a virtual machine like Java, and so you pop things on and off the stack, which is the collective processing. And so Ethereum, in a way, is like Golem, which is the giant big processor, distributed processing. Only Ethereum runs in a different level. It's a really cool thing. And you can come on in and write contracts that, as Veritasium is going to do, that would be perpetual, ongoing, smart, could learn, would gather more data over time, and could return value to you for years for an initial Ethereum investment in feeding its gas requirements, which is the amount of money you pay to make your code run in that virtual machine, because somebody's got to pay for the electricity, right? Right. And so they call it gas in Ethereum, and they have a gas price based on their collective costs of running all these servers and stuff. So it's a real ecosystem. And it's just cool as hell to mess around with the code. The code's very much like C. It's a type-safe C construct that is actually sort of like a C JavaScript kind of a merge. So people like myself that are old-time C coders are going to kick ass because we know how to do things very, very small, very efficient, and optimize code even after it's been compiled for greater optimization. And so our stuff will run faster on Ethereum and take less gas than somebody who's used to programming in JavaScript, for instance, because they program in a non-type safe environment where they don't care about things like variable size and processing speed and so on. And so it's just going to be really interesting to watch this new ecosystem develop. It's going to be cool, too. I mean, we could sit here and come up with an idea and write a robot for it probably in a few hours, put it out on the Ethereum network, and have it interacting with the other robots, the other corporations and stuff that day. And, so it's going to be near real-time business development at that level. But we were talking about the corporations. What set me off on all this was that you'd mentioned the corporations coming into this and stuff, and hedge funds, and they haven't even touched this. Most of the retirement touching funds are not able to buy cryptocurrencies because they're not, they don't fit into the categories that they're allowed to buy. So they have yet to really get into it. And then you see, Fidelity is really hot on it. And then you start reading about some of the insurance companies that are setting up cold storage centers And so they're going to be buying really soon, but they have not yet for a lot of regulatory reasons. So we haven't even seen the start of it.
Well, think
So
about
when you hear bubble, it means nothing. There's not even close to the beginnings of a bubble yet.
Yeah. It will be quite staggering. And whatever happens to Bitcoin now, in 2020, the halving happens. And so whatever it is then, in historical terms, it's just going to double in a very short period of time.
Well, think about what the Coinbase CEO. I keep bringing it back up because the number is so shocking. 7 days ago, approximately a week ago, 40,000 new users signing up in one flipping day to play the game, to get into cryptos. That's Coinbase. Coinbase is not even one of the top exchanges.
I know, but
You
that
know?
also may be a self-limiting thing, because I heard that they may have run into the limit of what the ACH will do, and that's the automated clearinghouse channel that allows them to tap into your bank account to put stuff in or take money out.
Wow.
There's only so many slots in that, and you buy into that based on what tier you are as a company. So that may be their limit. They may not be able to process more than that. Maybe
So,
pegged
hey,
out.
Cliff, what do you see as all these crypto exchanges are very kind of iffy and seem to be wobbling a lot when things get busy? Do you see a lot of crashes in these exchanges and online wallets when the financial chaos goes on in the mainstream, and these exchanges crashing and going away and people losing Bitcoin and Ethereum and all that?
No, I don't see it. There could be instances of that, but not in mass. Okay.
Okay.
Most of the exchanges, I think that you can probably list the top 20 exchanges globally, and anything that's been in business for over a year has already gone through those predictable IT kind of things that Joe and I have all lived through, where expansion equals got to buy more machines and get them on the floor right now and get this software loaded and all of that kind of crap, right? And so once they've got to the point where they've got the number of Joes they need there to do the job, then things will calm down. But we have yet to hit that really big, that cross into the mainstream part, where these guys are suddenly thrust into the world of like having to manage remote franchise centers, because it hasn't occurred to the exchanges yet to start, I don't think, serializing their server rooms. So they're pretty much all still centralized and trying to collect all of the IP addresses that want to hit them off of one basic server cluster. And so there's a lot of ways they can use their existing infrastructure with the existing software, and by distributing it at various different places around wherever they're working, their region, and duplicating it all, but having a master central for all of it, and they can speed things up. It just hadn't occurred to them. It's like the telephony. I mean, we all went through this process as the digital telephone system grew up, right? And so basically, you can think of it as cell towers. Right, you got one cell tower in town when the cell industry moves in, and people like myself had coverage along I-5 corridor. But if I got off the 4 miles off of I-5, my cell phone, which was inside a suitcase that had a battery attached by a big cord in another suitcase, it wouldn't work. But now there's cell phone towers everywhere. And so basically that's what's going to happen to the exchanges. The big money is going to see, hey, this is a huge business. And pretty soon you'll see Walmart doing exchanges for you. And, I'm surprised they haven't already. And some of the other companies, and pretty soon you'll be able to go into your Subway shop and, yeah, I'd like my change back in Bitcoin, please. That kind of thing. Now, Bitcoin has to come up to speed on the processing side. They've got to, we've got to actually go through the BIP 148 proposal, and or kick in some other speed connection for that to really go. But it's the exchanges themselves that are limiting factor now, not so much the Bitcoin block processing speed, because you see that a lot of the exchanges are just bogging down. But so far as I can have in the data sets, it's much more like these companies won't crash and fail so much as if they're going to fail, it will be because of too much success. Like the online betting stores that had too much success and didn't know what they were doing on the East Coast when they started off. And so they had to go through maybe a period of 2 or 3 months where they shut down and reorganized, that kind of deal.
Okay. Excellent.
Which, yeah, kind of cool, yeah.
So
it'd be a good business to be in, but...
Have you looked into, your last report was out a while back, the Bitcoin report you did, 2-3 weeks ago, whatever. Have you had a chance to, a little glimpse of anything coming up that anyone needs to maybe be aware of? Or, I mean, is it still simply June's, maybe the end of the month, it's going to kind of take off for the coins and that kind of thing? Is there going to be any, like, turmoil in the middle of the month?
Yeah, we have the waviness, and so from the 9th, which is what I think like Friday or something, from that period on is a bigger upward price pressure on the cryptos than prior to that period of time, and it really seems to hit Bitcoin at the end of the third week in the month. So I don't know if that comes down to if there's going to be a resolution of the contention, if there's going to be less fear about the BIP issue, or what it is, but Bitcoin will then start to scale up again in relative performance against the other cryptos. But we're right at that stage now, I think, where the next time we do get one of these rushes, next time we build one of those crocodile teeth, we're going to run into the limit of the exchanges in terms of their ability to handle it. And that, I think, is going to be an interesting period of time because it'll tell us which way the currencies are going to react. So imagine the situation where on the 9th, for whatever reason, everybody wakes up that Friday and says, I got to buy some cryptos today. We got to get some more cryptos. And so even if they've got an exchange account, they rush on in. Now, initially, we're going to start getting that vertical wall stuff we see with the cryptos that we've all become familiar with here, right? And that'll go along fine. But then we're going to see the hitting of the wall on the exchange. And so the question for me is, what will happen? Will it be a question then of the tooth getting lopped off and it being sort of choppy from that point on as all those people try and get in, and yet the exchanges can't cope? Or is it going to be like a pressure cooker kind of a thing, and it'll still continue up that vertical wall? It'll just form a whole lot of ridges as it goes on up, and the ridges would be like time compression, where you would have a lot of people try and get in and place their orders, and some people would place orders that would say buy at any cost, I don't care. Other people would say buy it at XYZ. And if it's not XYZ, then the exchange has to process through all of that. True, it's doing millions of them per second and so on, but nonetheless, the impact is going to be, with millions of people trying to buy, a combined impact on building the enamel on our crocodile tooth. And so I'm really curious which way it'll go, because either way is going to tell us a whole lot about the future of what's going to happen in July and August and September. And we haven't even seen anything. The summer, no matter how bad our summer is in terms of the chaos and the cryptos and something, it's nothing compared to what the data has for emotional tones for September onward.
Hey, not to jump from subject to subject, but I got so many silver people who are just pissed off if they didn't get in the cryptos. And I've been saying you got to have both. You got to have the cryptos, you got to have silver. And silver, I still, to this day, there's just so many positive reasons why silver should take a moonshot at any moment because of the 150 years of price suppression. I know your data has always got silver wrong. I've always got silver wrong. I just figured, hey, it's as long as it's manipulated until the very last day the manipulation ends, silver's going to pretty much be stuck in its little world sub $20. Does the Webbot see now jumps in the price of silver, like bigger jumps, rather than oh wow, we hit $25, we must hit the top and everybody's selling? Or does it say, oh my god, it just jumped $5 there, it just jumped $5 here?
That's what we have, is that gap language that I keep getting people giving me shit about. And it's like, I made a decision way back when, okay, this is what the data says, regardless of how manipulated silver is and how it works out in manifest. Nonetheless, this is the emotional tone. And so we've got all this language about gaps, and our gaps are $1 gaps, or and then $2 gaps, and limit up, and the COMEX and the breakdown of the system, and $25 up, and then holy crap, $30 gap, and this kind of a deal. So it's very much like they shut down the market, and when they open it up at a much higher price, because they have to, in order to not shut it down instantly. That they're basically looking at a situation of where the pressure could be very much like somebody makes a packet in precious metals. Okay, so what if someone, or excuse me, in cryptos, and then decides, okay, I'm going to convert this to silver. So what if somebody goes on out and follows the appropriate advice and rides the ripple wave, so to speak, right? Even though it's a manipulated bank currency, and they ride it at the right time, they buy in at the bottom, and they buy a ton of the stuff, and they sell at the top, and they get out, and they got 10 million in profit. And so they want to take, give half to the government. Got to give half to the government for all this crap. So they got $5 million they want to shelter. And so they say, well, I'm going to buy $5 million of silver. And they do it at the time where everybody else also wants to buy a lot of silver, and the market has to shut down. Well, they've still got that 5 million ounces of silver standing for delivery pending as soon as they open that market up. So they've got to accommodate it in some way or form, right? And they either have the silver to deliver it at $16 an ounce. Oh, nope, we don't have that silver. And the guy still has given us the millions of dollars. So now what we're going to have to do is to revalue silver pretty much instantly up to several $100s an ounce so that we can just give him what we have and be done with him, as opposed to ending up owing things, right? Mm-hmm. Because as you know, they can set the price anything they want realistically. And they may well be at that point. And what I think will be coincident with that occurring is near mainstream pictures showing up, because we have these things about images. So it'll be pictures or videos of people making trades of silver for really expensive goods. Okay, now this is another meme that is surfacing. We've had all these weird things in the data that were like hearkening back to the 1930s, as though all of us that were alive now were alive then. We didn't get through the shit then, and so we got to relive it now. And so we're going to have some flavor of that occur now. And so the imagery is hearkening back to the kind of imagery of two people standing in front of a Rolls Royce with a stack of silver coins on the hood of the Rolls Royce. And the photo was taken by a New York Times photographer, or Wall Street Journal. I can't remember which one. And it was in the right after the bond crash. And a guy bought a Silver Cloud or whatever it was, Rolls Royce, that had cost $25,000 the 8 months before, brand new, and this fellow bought that car for a stack of 100 silver ounces. And so that, because the bonds had just crashed, and the fellow that owned the car desperately needed something that was not debt, something that he could actually use, right? And so, and he had to basically skip town, I think, anyway, but that was a secondary part of the thing. But we're going to get those kind of images again. So we've had in our data about people buying high-speed boats and stuff for little tiny stacks of silver. So when that starts showing up, when we actually start seeing that meme develop, that's our temporal marker. And we're seeing little tiny bits of it, but not enough yet to say that it's in its fulfillment stage, but we're close.
That all my subscribers will say, finally, my silver paid off. I mean, it's so obvious on paper. You see from supply and demand, and every single thing you can possibly imagine is screaming, silver's gonna run. There's no argument you can give me other than manipulation that says silver shouldn't be well over $100, $200 today.
Well, here's your problem though. And this is a real terrible thing for your subscribers and everybody we know that's got silver. What if I'm correct, and in our outlandish fantasies we have a real breakdown of the financial system, and that we get these huge gaps, okay, and silver goes to $200 and $300 an ounce? Are you going to sell? The reason I asked that, the reason I asked that is because the dollar will be, it's not that the silver is going up in value, it's that its suppression has been somewhat lifted, and that the dollar is dying very rapidly. Because here's the thing, as you know, if that 150 years of absolute suppression was lifted entirely, you would not be talking $200 an ounce for silver. You'd be talking $200 or $2,000 plus dollars per silver. And the system is totally ruptured at that point. Mm-hmm. So I would think that if silver hit $200 an ounce, when I started messing about in silver in 1999, I set a target, because my goal then was to pay off my house with the profit in the silver. And I said to myself, okay, when silver starts reaching $175 an ounce, I'll sell into strength, and I'll then have enough with the silver I've got to pay off the house I'm in. Well, they were able to suppress it for who knows how long now. And yeah, exactly. And I paid off the house anyway without the silver. So it's kind of moot. But my goal at that point was to start selling into strength at $175 per ounce. Now in 2017, as opposed to 1999, I wouldn't take that approach. if it actually jumps up like that, I would sit back and say to myself, okay, what's going to happen next year? If I don't need that silver to actually leave my hands right now, boy, just because it would be tempting to get a couple of $100 for it, maybe next year it'll be so valuable, it'll be 1 ounce of silver per Bitcoin, something like that. And at that point, maybe Bitcoin will be 10, 12, 13, 14, 15,000 per Bitcoin. So it's going to be a really weird kind of a situation. So if you need the silver or need the fiat to, pay the electric bill, well, you got to do what you got to do. But in general, I think I'd be kind of reluctant to sell this stuff at the moment.
Right. Yep.
Oh, I agree 100%. And I mean, the reality is we're going to hit a point when you're going to be sitting on Bitcoin, Ethereum, or whatever cryptos. You're going to be sitting on your silver thinking, should I trade the Bitcoin for silver or silver for Bitcoin? Because there's no other choices on a monetary scene.
Right. Screwy world,
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. I'm buying more physical silver with some Bitcoin profits here and there, because I try to keep my portfolio balanced at least a little bit. But with the cryptos going crazy, it's kind of impossible to balance the silver that's not moving. So I'm loading up on physical silver and slowly selling some Ethereum and some Bitcoin. But I still know they're going to go skyward. I just like to balance things out with all this cheap silver.
Yeah. And the cheap silver issues, that's really strategic stuff. All right. Already the language has shifted from, like say in the 70s into the 80s over silver. In the non-financial world, we started seeing more and more linking of the concept of sovereign, strategic, and silver all together, right? The 3 S's. And now it is like you start reading what I call the back channel documents, which are all the academic white papers that are released by West Point or Annapolis. Real sources of stuff that are real solid information, because these guys are trying to make their way in the hierarchy of the military, and part of their credentials are the white papers they release as academics within that military structure. And so you can see what the military itself is thinking in a generalized sense, because a lot of these people that are doing this, we would think of as like postgraduate students that would later on go on to be the CEO and that kind of thing. In this case, they would be colonels and generals. And so they'll be part of the thought shaping process. So what these guys are thinking now is how the military is going to be behaving 5 years, 10 years out. And so you read all these back channel things. You can do the same thing with the Council on Foreign Relations. And there is a screwy situation, because you can see it in the military, because they are smart bombs and all of this kind of thing. They rely on the technology. They know silver is key to that technology, and so on. So you would think that it's obvious that you should see the linkage of the 3 S's, the sovereign, silver, and security, or in this case, strategic. And but to see that in Council on Foreign Relations, which theoretically is a diplomatic kind of think tank sort of a thing, really gives one pause. So the aspect of silver and the technology, there's a lot of people that are still in the controlling power positions for the social order that are aware of what's coming down the pike with silver, and we're starting to see the leaks in those languages. It's going to be a weird time that way. But we've had the woo stuff in the data for a long time about how silver will be strategic in a couple of different ways, but will be required for whole layers of technology. And if you don't have silver, you can't participate. And so Mexico is going to do really, really well as a source for silver for all of if we want to think about them as like the unaligned nations. Because imagine a situation where technology evolves to where you don't need the actual physical cell phone in order to have communication. And I'm not talking about the smartphone things. I'm not talking about any application or whatever. I'm just strictly the communication part, the ability to make a phone call. What if you got to the point where you could say that you were female, and you had a little tiny silver beauty mark, and so you get up in the morning, put your finger on it, and you put the beauty mark on, and that little silver beauty mark is your Star Trek kind of communicator. All right, so that's the thing you make phone calls through all day long. It's a piece of cosmetics. And so we've had instances of those kind of descriptors show up in the data sets, all hooked around uses of silver in ways we haven't even thought of yet. And so it's going to be really a key kind of a deal, not just like smart bombs, but you won't be able to communicate in that whole cell phone layer, because the thing that she put on her face doesn't operate on cell phone frequencies. All right, it's going to operate off of a biological generated frequency where your biology is your phone number. So this kind of stuff is coming now.
Wow.
Because everybody's biology is unique, right? 100%. In fact, the military knows, and they tried to develop sniffer robots. I happen to have, because of my father's connections, what he did in Vietnam, I got connections to this outfit that was called, well, I won't go into them, but they ended up being involved in the torture things in Iraq. So I know some people that were in a subcontractor to the military that were involved in that private prison torture thing for the CIA. And so that whole corporation went through all kinds of terrible upheaval, as they should, because they got a lot of bad karma for what they were doing. But I know people at that level, and this corporation was deep into the like what we think of as DARPA, the development of weapons and this sort of thing. And these guys were testing a robot that sniffed for bacteria. Okay, and the idea was that there were 162 different forms of skin bacteria that they'd identified. And so they were of the opinion that they could use this little sniffer machine and see if you were related to somebody. So if they found somebody that was a terrorist, if they found that you were a terrorist in Iraq or whatever, they'd have the sniffer machine going up and they'd sniff you, and it would take and analyze these 162 bacteria, whether you had them or not, and the ratios and so on. And then you could go through the whole village and sniff everybody else to see who was a close match, right? Because it would match it just the same way we do on context right now. Right now, NSA and CIA are matching the three of us up in a pattern, and then later on, after you guys broadcast this or put it out on YouTube, anybody that watches it will be added to those lists in the NSA and the CIA register as being part of our network, right? Of our evil plot to overthrow the universe.
Or at least report on the overthrow.
There you go. Exactly. Right. But anyway, so these guys are off doing weird stuff. But I can tell you that sniffer technology failed because it was a cost issue relative to silver. All their sensors were 100% dependent on it. They had like 4,000 of the things in it.
So Mexico will build the wall, and they will pay for the wall to keep everybody out from coming into Mexico.
They don't want their silver going out. Yeah.
So how about housing? Is housing, I mean, your reports, last few of them, I think, has been talking about real estate, high-end real estate in certain spots is going to go down. I've seen that a bunch already. I've done enough videos on there to, for anyone's liking, I guess. But, a bunch of times I've seen it over and over, and I keep reporting on it. So I've kind of beat that horse. I don't feel like I need to do another WebBot hit on those. But you mentioned regular real estate, not looking too pretty as well.
We're talking about the 9th onward. So this Friday, or whenever the 9th is, it's Friday or Saturday, I think. That's a big turning point for a lot of these things that apparently are interrelated insofar as the data is going into. So, so the idea is that from the morning of the 9th, in the data sets, when it racks up in model space, we get you go into the morning of the 9th, everything looks normal, looks just like the 8th and the 7th. And then there's these bursts of emotional tones. And we can get these bursts out of there and see what they're affecting. And so a number of things are going to burst out on the 9th, including cryptos. And so a lot of things economic. I don't know why. I don't know what the underlying cause is.
Friday's when they release all the bad news, because you forget about it by Monday.
Well, okay, but there's also going to be some about real estate coming out that's going to be effective of real estate for at least one long-term data cycle. So for at least 19 months from June 9th, real estate's going to be in a maximum point of emotional turmoil and language around it, good and bad. So within this next 19 months, I expect that we'll see these stories of people buying mansions for, stacks of silver, that kind of a thing, simply because the economic chaos has reached that particular level, and that the real estate underlying system is the ability is it has nothing to do with land, people needing to live in houses or any of that. It's entirely about this debt-based structure that exists now, owned by the federal government. And so because of the things that the government's going to go through, our real estate stuff shows it's getting even worse as we go through August, September, October, and November. And part of our issues are that in August, we get this like split in our real estate stuff, okay? And so there's one half of the real estate data mass that goes off to the issues that are facing government, their ability to come up with yet more debt, to fund more people that want more debt, to buy more houses for debt. And so the whole system really just starts crumbling down that way. And so prices are going to crumble. The banks that are, the regional banks are going to get into trouble, all the stuff that's been in the reports. On the other side of that, though, in the other part of that data mass, we have the issues that are going to be affected by the potential flooding, maybe in California, early onset of winter, but also the seismic problems that are going to hit the U.S. and other natural disaster kind of crap, everything from hurricanes and tornadoes, rivers flooding, all of this kind of stuff is going to be so bad. It's also going to affect real estate markets. And so it's awful hard to sell a house when it's kind of hard to decide, well, do we move out and knock it over or try and rebuild it because of the most recent, disaster. And a lot of houses that are nominally for sale now are going to be destroyed and damaged in this what's coming up. And here's the horror of it all. A lot of the data sets have had for a long time the concept of this person that we that I characterized as Demolition Dana. Okay, Dana could be a female name or it could be a male name. I wanted something ambiguous, gender ambiguous, because it's going to be involving lots of millennials. And Demolition Dana was a person that, because of the existent circumstances at the time, was required to put on coveralls when they'd been a college student or worked in an office and get into a tractor and go and help demolish malls and strip things down and recover copper and take stuff apart as we dismantled this old infrastructure. And so I always saw Demolition Dana, either female or male, it didn't matter, as an emblem for the destruction of the old infrastructure. But it brought up in the data by the existent circumstances that we're now going to be going through. And part of that stuff in that set from way back, and I don't know how long that's been in there, maybe 2003 or 2004 was when the Demolition Dana stuff first started showing up, even before we'd reached the peak of the last housing bubble. And it was talking about knocking down malls and having to destroy whole subdivisions and take apart whole subdivisions and convert them to rubble and trash and try and recycle what they could. And it was going to be a whole industry for the millennial generation and younger. And now what's showing up, then it didn't make any sense. Now what's showing up, though, even more so than it has throughout this entire long-term period, was the insurance companies. And so what's going to happen, according to my interpretation of the data, is we're going to get hit by these natural disasters, and the insurance companies won't have the funds to pay off because of the 0% interest that's been going on for all these years. So they won't pay off on any house they don't have to pay off on, and that'll include every house that was a rental, that'll include every house that's unoccupied, that no one's making a claim on and trying to beat down their door to get some money out of, and many of the people that will be doing that won't get money. So the data is showing that huge swaths of the country are basically move away, destroy, and try and scramble enough stuff to rebuild something in lieu of it. And if there's a mansion that fell over and part of it's on your property, well, nobody necessarily owns it. Get your tractor out and haul it off, and maybe somebody can use some of the materials. It's literally showing it as being that bad from August onward. Now, it's not all going to happen in August or anything, but we should, according to the data sets at the time that we're in the $13,000 range for the Bitcoin, there's going to be like a national, I don't know if we want to say New Deal, but a works program from which Demolition Dana is going to spring. And you will probably have even like, what's that term? Not glitzy, but, like pop art posters of join the Demolition Corps, that, Uncle Sam needs you to run a tractor and destroy this shit, that kind of thing, right?
How do you, I mean, both you guys are in the market for houses. How do you pick where you're going to buy now?
You go on that one, Joe.
I'm looking for basically I like the fact that a nice water source is nearby. I also want a house that honestly has a well on it. And
Yeah.
septic, that's nice. Usually when you find them out here in my area, in Florida, if it's got septic, it usually also means it's got a well, but not always. Sometimes there's septic and city water, but that's my criteria. But I can't do this whole thing of, quarter acre, three quarters, 0.38 of an acre or something. That's just not big enough. I need at least, like, minimum in my mind, I've got to have an acre. Because even with that, I've done vertical grow, hydroponic gardening and things. Man, you can grow a lot in a small space. But I still need room. May need to build something, or, family may be coming. Guy set up shop over here. I'm talking emergency situation. You've got these 55 and older homes. You can look on Craigslist all day long. And the old person, dies, mom and pop die, and kids are now paying $400 or $500 a month just for the stupid fee for the thing to sit there, and it's killing them. Someone take this thing, we'll take $2,000-$3,000 for this thing, when they spent $40,000 for it, 10 years ago or 12 years ago. So it'd be something like that where you go in, grab one of those things. Hey, emergency situation, your mom and pop, or family members. So that's kind of where my mind's at. That if that day ever comes, I can't do that on a little quarter acre or whatever, and I need a little spot. So that's, even though it may never even happen where we are. Who knows? But my mind's always kind of going there just in case. So I do want a house, a regular house. I don't want a trailer. I want a regular house, nice piece of land. I've got my solar panels in my garage sitting here collecting dust. I want to put those to use. As a matter of fact, I want to get more. But again, even if I own this house, not a chance in hell I'm in an HOA. That's another thing. I'm not going into an HOA because all the crap that you and I would like to do. Oh, sorry, can't do that. Can't do that. You can't do that. I'm not playing that game. It's my damn property.
You don't own it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Owns it.
And even then, you don't pay your taxes. Someone else you're gonna find out someone else owns it, and it's the government. But at least that's that piece. At least if I got my Bitcoin right, my silver right, I'm not gonna have to worry about that piece.
True.
Which kind of made me think earlier when you were talking about silver and Bitcoin, and my mind on that is, I am keeping my silver like last. I'm not unloading my silver until the day I feel like I just have to. Bitcoin
until the day when manipulation ends. I'm telling everybody, there will be a day to trade some silver for something else that's undervalued. But until that day, when manipulation ends and silver's freely traded one day, you'll kind of know, okay, I'm looking over here. Here's a new thing that I want to invest in, or I want to, try out. I know there will be no monster upside from silver. It's already $20,000 an ounce. This is probably wouldn't be measured in dollars by then. It's already 50 Bitcoin an ounce. So, you move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the route to go with the silver, is not to see it as a lifetime hold, something to pass on to the kids, because in the data sets, we've got these issues that rise up, right? That basically suggest that because of the running into the ice age, with the size of population that we have on the planet now, we have to make this shift into true tech world, the kind of stuff that was really envisioned in Star Trek and that kind of thing. And in that period of time, getting in there, we'll need silver desperately. It'll be extremely valuable. But at some point, we're going to cross a barrier in knowledge, and thereafter, we'll be able to create silver. And we'll create it at whatever purity level we want. And in fact, it'll probably be hard to create it so that it's not 7 nines pure, right? Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing. And so at that point, silver becomes a producible quantity item that can be generated by energy. And so you need to have sold out of the silver, maybe 1 or 2 for historical reasons of, the impurities and so on, because those things are valuable over time to capture stuff, right? Like I know of a guy that in a science auction spent $400,000 for 2 vials of air from, I want to say 17 or 1800s. And it was a scientific experiment that was done at the time, and in some guy's lab, where they put oxygen, or put air, just regular old air from the period, in these glass vials, and then sealed the glass vials at the time. So it's just it's encapsulated. And so the thinking was it would be a valuable contrast to our air today, the ratios of gases and so on. So these people bought that to analyze it. And the beauty of their approach, of course, is they don't have to destroy it to analyze it. They're doing it all energetically. So it also is going to retain its value, and yet will deliver the information they need. A couple of Russian guys bought this. really smart thinking so at some point silver rounds that are stamped in this century and the last century will be valuable, maybe a century from now, that kind of thing. But they'll be valuable for the impurities that were captured at the time of that stamping that won't be able to be recreated at that time. So you can't unlearn a technology and do things badly. So you can't go back and learn how to do things that led to the celadon crazing in Korean porcelain, right? It was not a design effect they intended to create. It was a result of a screw up in their processing that is just so beautiful they kept doing it. And these days we know how to do it to perfection. But very few people that are doing celadon crazing on porcelain recognize that it was really a flaw, that they really didn't intend to do that. So it was one of those happy accidents.
Hey, Cliff,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
As far as timing on silver, do you think when we do hit this point where, you look at almost anything can be created synthetically in a lab these days, precious metals is next on the list. Do you think it'll be all of a sudden, bang, we can create silver? Or is it going to be, here's the steps, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, we'll be able to do it at a price that makes sense?
The latter, but we're already there. Okay, about 6 years ago, there were these 3 discoveries that were made. One about how particles relate to each other in time, over the course of time. And then 2 other discoveries about the decay rates of radionucleotides in our current sun environment. And all 3 of these things together are part of the chain that's going to lead us into that discovery of how to do the silver sort of thing. So it's coming already. We could probably do it now, but at a huge cost. Like the first time we created an artificial diamond, it cost, tremendous amounts of money. Just like you see the pictures now on the internet of people from 1950 moving in a 2 megabyte drive, hard drive into a company, and it takes 6 people and a bunch of forklifts and to move this giant 2 megabyte drive from IBM into this firm. And so we're at that stage with it. We could probably do it now. By that I mean, if we set out, we could have like a project, and maybe a year from now we would be actually creating silver, but the cost would be astronomical because we don't understand the fundamentals that allow us to do it cheaply. And so lacking that understanding, we would do it in a very crude fashion and at a huge level of waste that just shouldn't be involved in that. We're actually seeing some of this stuff in new devices come out.
I think I saw a show years ago where they did exactly what you said, except it was either a diamond or gold, and they're like, here's this gigantic laboratory, big, massive machine, multi-million-dollar machine, and then they finally did it, and they put enough pressure on these compounds or whatever to, it was like, here's a few specks of gold or a little, had a microscope to see the damn thing, and they're like, we could already do it, but like you said, how much did that just cost us to do this? It was completely unfeasible.
Well, and then here's something to think about. Okay, let's get into some woo-woo here, right? Jumping off of silver, because a lot of people don't know this, but some of the silver, Bix, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but the Manhattan Project silver. There's something like that going on right now. It's not involving the what were they called in
Calutrons?
Yeah, it's not involving those, but it's involving CERN. And CERN had been buying silver for some time, and I hear they've had it spun into wire. Actually, they had to buy it and melt it and get a certain level of purity, is the rumors that are coming out. And so they've got some level of silver locked up in CERN at the moment. And here you have this really spooky time travel machine, a machine so big, it's the biggest machine on the planet, the biggest machine humans have ever made, bigger than those 10-story tall diesel machines that they made in the 1800s. This machine dwarfs that because we got to actually embed the thing in the planet. And there's miles of tunnels and all of this kind of crap. None of us know what it does. We're all paying for it globally. No matter what you say, even the Chinese are paying for it because of the VAT taxes and stuff that they buy from Europe and everything. We're all kicking in pennies for this bugger. And yet they say we're theoretically using it to smash particles together to hunt for the Higgs boson particle. Like we really all give a rat's ass that we find it,
right.
But anyway, so what are they doing with it? And why did they suddenly develop a real need for silver? not copper, not the real pure copper they were buying that all of those things were wrapped in for all those years, did they run into the same kind of issues that the Manhattan Project ran into, which is the efficiency of silver in electricity that is so far superior to copper that you actually get a like a peak performance up-leveling effect that you can't get anywhere else because you're dealing with it as a quantum entrainment level. And so you think about silver in a weird way. Silver is known in the Russian world as the psi metal, okay, PSI, psychic, all right, that kind of thing, because the Russians actually were doing psychic level research, and it did freak out the American military, and they did come up with all of the remote viewing and the crews that stared at goats and all of that kind of stuff, right? Now, the Russians, though, their psychic research was not really the way it's been portrayed in our environment. But they discovered in doing their psychic research, everybody from Kozyrev onward, that those people that were involved in doing psychic stuff, trying to produce a psychic effect at some level, were amplified in the presence of silver. Okay, and it was amplified in the presence of silver in various different ways, depending on how you dealt with the silver and what form it was in. And all this stuff originated out of a lot of the research that we bastardized as pyramid power in the 70s. And if you start looking at the underlying stuff, Lubenkov and Kozyrev, and their time studies with silver and this sort of thing, you see what was coming out of the Russians' minds. So the Russians know that silver is the psychic metal, and they were actually issuing silver in specific forms to their psychic guys when they would come on and do their tasks in the morning. So like our remote viewers may have been better if they'd held a liberty in their hand, while they were doing it. We just don't know.
Hey, Clif, that leads me to one thing that I wanted to make sure I asked you, because I talked about it before, how the web bots go out there, or the remote viewers go out there. If they come back information that this is going to happen in the future, does that mean the future is already set? Is it a framework that we live through and we influence? How is it that the web bots can go into the future and see what's about to happen?
Right. It's not the software. Okay. The web bots. So we need to think about our terms a little differently, because what I've got is just software that picks up shit off the internet. Okay. It just goes and gets the language off the internet. So the software does nothing. It's not artificial intelligence or any of that. It's just real simple, pick up language and then do things with it and sort it based on all these rules. So it's the humans that are going out into the future. Okay. All of us are psychic beyond anybody's understanding, even our own understanding. So if you want to get into deep woo-woo, I'll tell you how it actually manifests and why we pick it up. And you can think about it at this level. What you see of any human is not really what the totality of that human. It's only what your eyes present to you. So this could get real deep, guys. You got to follow along on this.
Bring it.
Okay, your eyes are a subsystem. All right, you only have 4 senses. The science lies to you and tells you that touch is a sense. It's not. There's no sense organ involved in what we call the sensation of touch. The only sense organs we have are inside our hard noggin. They're protected by our cranium because they're vital for keeping us alive. And our sense of touch is not. People can actually lose the sense of touch and they do fine. But if you lose all your other senses, you die real quick. And the thing is that the senses of the eyes are only processing. You don't see light. Okay, you don't get to see that. Your eyes see light. And your brain does some interpretation for you and presents you with an image. You have no idea what your eyes are actually perceiving. You only get what your eyes present to you. Okay, so you cannot, for instance, see inside my body or your own body. But the inside of your body is emitting photons right this minute, continuously. They're called biophotons. Every cell emits them from the mitochondria. And these biophotons are presumed by some people that are really thinking deep about it to be the mechanism by which our DNA is used to fix memory. So a lot of people think of DNA in a particular way based on the idea of the double helix and the time from the 50s when they discovered it and all of this sort of thing, as though DNA is this fixed structure from which our bodies are determined, and that's not the way it is at all. And in fact, most of what we're told is wrong, and it's the reverse of that. DNA is actually how your memories are fixed in time through your body. And it's done so through these biophotons that are jumping out of my body right at the moment. And see, here's the thing. You don't see light, you're only presented with an image. Your eyes don't even see light because we're in an environment that is entirely flooded with light, and we never ever get to see the light itself. All we get to see are the things that reflect light and the reflection of light. And if you actually think about it, none of this makes any sense because, as we're told from scientists, the light comes this way, hits something, and then bounces off, and you get this scatter effect. But that cannot happen. That cannot exist, because if that were true, then you would never be able to see anything, because all you would ever see would be the scatter effect of light and never any clear image coming back through that scatter effect. And so you find that light is not as we're told, and you go out into space, and lo and behold, you can't see the stars. They don't exist. You can't even see our own sun. In fact, you can see a faint amount, without special aid, you can see a faint amount of a disturbance where the sun is, but you're not seeing the sun. There's no light source there. It doesn't show. What you actually have to do is to take your glass that you're looking through and put little ridges in it to cause refraction in order to see the stars or anything out in space. So light clearly is not as we've been told. Further, light doesn't travel at 186,000 miles per second. Light does not travel at all. And it's there constantly forever. And we swim in a sea of it because of the nature of the energy involved. Okay, so that having been said, that our senses are subsystems that provide us with taste as a complete experience, smell as a complete experience without us getting involved in thinking about the processing of any of that. Hearing and sight are all that same way. Touch is different. Our bodies are not as we see them. So, for instance, I know right now that if you had the proper equipment, you could stand outside of my house here 60 or 70 feet away and sense my heartbeat. As you got closer to me, you'd pick up various different levels of radiation that I'm emitting out, including these biophotons. And so they've now got a device that is not heat signature, and it's not a X-ray or anything like that they can put into goggles that they can give to military fellows, and they can fly around in helicopters or be anywhere and see you from your biophotons. And it is so discriminatory, as I've been told, that this device allows them to see through walls, because material, steel, brick, all of this stuff is also continually emitting photons. Not at the same level as living things, and that's what allows them to discriminate between the frequency of the photons that are being emitted by stuff and the biophotons that we actually create as we're doing things. And so they're able to see through walls to a certain degree and say, there's a human, and they're not doing it with heat. So you can put on as much shielding as you want. It doesn't matter. Really cool technology. But it also confirms that our bodies are not as we see them. And so if you're an advanced yogic kind of guy and you do thinking about this, you realize that every reincarnation you go through, your breath form, the body that you inhabit, comes from a template that universe provides. And when you inhabit that body, you bring with it all of the karma that you didn't resolve from that previous life. In that karma, I know this from personal experience, are things you must go through in order to resolve them. In my case, it's thousands of stitches. Okay, I've had so many wounds and damages to my body that I can no longer remember how many thousands of stitches I've actually had. I know that my knee took 300 and some odd, and I had to pay $6 a pop for each of those, right? Because I didn't have insurance at the time. But the others were when I was a kid and so on, and covered by the military, and I never counted. But I've had thousands of stitches. I've got wounds all over me that were forced on me by the karma that I had dealt with this breath form in my previous life. And so that doesn't make any sense to anybody. But these wounds are actually held in the bodies that are outside of what we see. So I have an energetic body, I've got a psychic body, I've got a breath body, an atmospheric body. So I've got all these shells, if you will, that extend out, and I'm actually more sort of lumpy egg-shaped than I am what we see. Inside each of those shells are these various layers that will then press themselves in to form the scars on my body as I go through time and accumulate the various experiences that those scars are part of. Not represent, they're not markers, they're just part of that experience, and you have to go through that. So it's as though you're walking along and there's a fog that holds this particular injury, and you have to walk through that fog and accept that injury, or not. There's the rub. you don't have to accept this stuff. You can change all of these kind of things because it's happening at an individual level. And if you're smart enough, you can say, I've come to this particular level. I've worked out all these issues. I don't have to take, that particular wound that's going to create this scar. I can actually have some other form of impact on my body, and it'll go through. And so now here's the beauty of this. If we think about millions of people, billions of people that are actually having this experience now on their individual karma, trying to deal with the karma that they're brought from a previous life, and it's being impacting and expressing on their bodies now, our future is really the collective aggregation of all of that. Okay, so Bix makes a decision that he's wise enough that he does not have to struggle anymore, that he's going to put down that struggle with alcohol. He's not going to take that path. He's not going to go through these issues. He's not going to gain that weight and have to have that appendix surgery because he doesn't really need that scar that he can sort of feel developing now if he were to go down that path. But because he does that, because he makes those decisions, he's altered his personal future. So my data in no way thinks that our future is stamped in the our future collectively is relatively easy to read because we're all going through this shit continuously, and there's a lot of people that are just simply giving into it. And so if you could sort of pick out all of those kind of thoughts, you'd be able to see what the generalized future was of all of those people going through that thing at the same time. Make sense?
Yeah. Amazingly, yeah.
Okay. And so that's really what's happening, is that Bix knows he's got these issues, right? And so he'll start talking about hay. Hay, not Hey. But boy, I saw an interesting hay field on the way down to my dad's house the other day, right? Or driving over here. And this color of the sun just struck that hay. It was just gorgeous. There was lots of yellow and so on. And boy, that was sure interesting color there. And then he'll go on 2 or 3 days later, there'll be some other thing and he'll reference the color yellow. And it'll go on, and then he'll have another expression that goes towards a yellowish kind of an emotion. And then 5 or 6 days later, oh, hey, gallbladder attack, bile, yellow. All right. His body was telling him at a psychic level by bringing up the color of yellow if he had a gallbladder problem and, that kind of thing. Right. And so it's telling you at a level that if you're smart enough, you pay attention to your own perceptions and you read what your body is trying to tell you because it doesn't have words. And yet it can actually sit there, so to speak, and view the crap that it's going to have to go through, because your breath form, your body, is not all you are. All right. Humans are much, much more than our bodies. In fact, we're so much more than our bodies that we can only shove a little tiny bit of our consciousness inside our bodies. And that's why we're all fucking mentally ill, because we're so damn large in our expanse that being crammed in here just doesn't fit well, and it doesn't work well. And it's a real pain in the ass. And that's the way it's supposed to be. So our collective future is both firm but malleable in my understanding. It's firm if we don't do anything about it, but it's malleable if we do. And so let's talk about some other woo-woo stuff here, okay? Let's talk about Antarctica and these three individuals. I've got a real problem, okay? I got all this stuff from Antarctica, all kinds of data about it. It's really cool. So I write it up. And then the next month, as I'm doing the processing, I've got balloons that should not exist of my own concepts, sort of my own words. All right, they're not so close that they can be screened out by MOM, which is my model of model space, which does that for me as a part of the spiders. But it's close enough that I then have to apply a manual filter, so to speak, just to screen it out. It's close enough I can't be sure it's not a replication of someone spewing my stuff in some other language and it coming back, so I don't want to self-amplify. This happened like November of 2015. I first started noticing this. And I'd had Antarctica stuff building up over time, but every time I released a report, I was unable to filter out these echoes, and they started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was a royal pain over a number of months because we had such cool Antarctica stuff coming out. And I knew that I was not being played, okay? I knew that there was nobody out there monkeying with the data with a deliberate intent to screw with my system. Some people have tried, and I was able to actually ascertain that and blow them off actually in the process. So I start looking for Antarctica data. I get this other ripple out, and it's like, okay, what's going on here? Can't figure this out. Took me maybe 6 or 7 or 8 months to finally get a handle on it and get all these extra filters in place. That was a lot of work. It turns out that what was happening, in my opinion, was that I was writing reports, and these individuals were buying my reports and then using the reports to piggyback or spring from for their particular, let's call it a scam, okay? And it's the Blue Chicken Cult guys, Corey Good and David Wilcock, and to a lesser extent, Jay Widener and Gaiam TV. And so I was getting my own words back in a distorted fashion, but with the same emotional tones that I'd been putting out in those reports. And so I knew something was up somewhere. And so here we are in a situation where I knew I wasn't being deliberately attempt to be skewed, but it was nonetheless quite irritating with this. And so the malleable part of the future kind of thing comes into this, because once I was able to understand what was happening, maybe June of last year, when we first started getting into it, it hit at the same time as the censorship stuff, right? Because it was starting to come in. I started noticing this just at the same time that I started noticing that all the alt-sex sites on YouTube were getting really hit hard by demonetization. And it had sprung up a whole flurry of language that eventually they started demonetizing alt-right and everybody they didn't like, and it spread to the giant censorship thing that we were dealing with now. But it started 6 or 8 months ahead of that with the alt-gen sexuality kind of sites on YouTube, and I was able to pick it up then. And I was uncertain as to whether it was actually causing my problems. And so I didn't put this down to maliciousness or fraud or anything for a very long time. I just thought it was an algorithmic interaction that was causing issues. And then it came out that, well, Corey Good had, or somebody in his team, was basically taking my reports and then following them up within a couple of weeks, a week or so after they were released, with that same emotional tonality amplified, coming out around Antarctica and some of the other stuff. So I did some tests, put some keywords into some of the reports, and sure enough, I'd validated, and that was the case. And so I got really pissed. It's very difficult for me, because now I've got to go back and scrub to remove all of their influences so I can get a much better picture. Now, I know that I was accurate on Antarctica ahead of them polluting the data, because I went and validated a lot of the stuff that the data sets were saying by actually looking at the maps, spending hours crawling around Google Earth maps and other maps, looking at what's going on in Antarctica, by going through hours of examining stock market or stock filings on various different corporations that have Antarctica business, right? And seeing how much more money they're putting into that, how it's all ballooned, and how they're hiring and stuff. And we know also, we have real world validation that the number of jobs in the last year going for Antarctica is more than doubled in terms of the announcements. Okay, so if you need a job, Antarctica is the place to go, apparently.
These are thousands and thousands of people, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm studying TIG welding, right? I'll grow hair and I'll go in undercover as a TIG welder. But anyway, though, they're actually hiring for, extreme condition welders, and they're paying huge amounts of money for that. So some of the subcontracting companies are basically, it's a write your own ticket, $20,000 a month if you're an extreme conditioned welder and you can do this kind of thing. Hey, come on down.
It's probably the only way you can get in there.
I think
it's
so.
It's Clif.
Well, they'd see me, the face recognition stuff. But anyway, so I had to scrub out all of that stuff, right? But I know our future at one level is malleable, and I'm actually hoping to take advantage of that. Because here's the deal. Going back to the 1930s discussion, there was this really weird situation that developed into the 30s where this woman came on up, and she was basically, in the 30s, everybody was the same as they are now. Okay, everybody's all whacked out mentally because you're stressed by no money. You're trying to scramble enough to stay alive. There's no jobs. There's no future. The loss of hope. That more than anything, loss of hope and the despair is like the sign of the depression. And along in the middle of that came a woman who said, I will lead us out of here. I'm the Joan of Arc of this depression, right? And her name was Amy Semple McPherson. and she started this thing called the Foursquare Church, and it was a religious revival movement, and it really gained all kinds of emotional support, and people flocked to it, and she started getting money, and all this stuff started flowing to her as these kind of things happen. And all of that same language is replicating itself now around Corey Good. And so the question in my mind is, if he's doing that role, will he have to go through the abduction and all of will we all have to go through all of that trash that came out as a result of the Amy Semple McPherson kind of thing? I mean, it destroyed hundreds of thousands of lives, families, and all of this sort of deal as the churches came unwound and everything all broke up. And yet I see parallels between those two sets of languages, the language that we can still capture around that instance from the 1930s and the language we have now. And bear in mind, by the way, that from 1995 or 6 until about 2006, I had I had several subscriptions that allowed me unfettered access to old newspapers in a digital form. And that's what the bots were trained on. That's what I trained my software on, was that I wrote the software and then aimed it at all of these newspaper archives. And that's where I first learned to tune the lexicon, get the emotional tonality, and all of this kind of stuff. And so I've got all these records that show me the emotional tones that were coming up of my software as I developed it. And, there were these spikes, and some of them stuck out in my mind. One of them was the Amy Semple McPherson deal, which went on for a number of years and was very easy to track in the newspapers. And I did a lot of refining on my lexicon on some of these instances. And, that and the Lindbergh baby, all of these things that had huge emotional impact from then, where we had the complete language set, were just marvelous things to do data mining off of, and then to develop the lexicon. And then I applied it to modern stuff, and lo and behold, we're still the same assholes, and we're still having the same emotions, and still saying the same words about them. So it kind of works.
Oh, is anything else we want to discuss, or you think that was about it?
No, whatever, guys.
One more. And I've been dying. I don't know if you can talk about it, Cliff, if you want to talk about it. I've been working on this book about the gold in the Grand Canyon, its significance, and all the archaeological finds in the Grand Canyon, all the no-go zones there, and the sacred Indian sites that nobody's allowed to go into. And all the research tells me that there was a gigantic find of gold within the Grand Canyon. And it has to do with the Federal Reserve was knee-deep in it. The New York Times announced it on the front page, billions of ounces of gold. Now, this would change the world today even. And to me, it has always been the reason one of the reasons Woodrow Wilson actually succumbed to the bankers and said, okay, yeah, you guys could take over the monetary system. And we've talked a little bit about this in the past, and I don't want you to say anything you don't want to say, but what is your take on that potential gold find or the mysteries within the Grand Canyon, and where will it take us if, like, the U.S. wants or needs to go back onto a gold standard?
Well, I think there is indeed vast quantities of gold. I mean, that seems fairly substantially assured just based on Buckminster Fuller's work in 1932 through 35, because he did it from a different approach. He basically, it was as though he was sampling the Earth as though it was an asteroid. And he's saying in any given place, you're going to find, that X percent, 50% of all of the Earth is actually aluminum in the form of bauxite. X percentage is the copper and so on. And he did all of the minerals. And then he did areas where you could probably find these things. And he was staggered that we didn't have much more gold above ground because there was so much more to be had. Mm-hmm. Now, the Grand Canyon, that's really interesting. I actually have on my notes here, one of the three things I wanted to talk about were the stellae in Louisiana, the Smithsonian, and the Mima Mounds, because they all relate to the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon, by the way, is not an area that is a river etching itself over time through sand, and taking the sand away. Grand Canyon didn't form that way. It formed the same way as the giant Grand Canyon on Mars, and probably at the same time. And that is from a lightning strike. And people don't believe me, but it's our solar system is all wonky, okay? It's been disturbed. It's been disturbed by the destruction of a planet. It's been disturbed by the capture or the alteration of the orbit of Venus. Venus is interesting because its orbit and its day are the same length, and it goes in, it spins the opposite direction of all the other planets. At the same time as all that is going on, the records show that there's historical petroglyphs and even written forms of descriptions about giant interplanetary lightning strikes. And so the Grand Canyon was undoubtedly caused by one of those way back when, and thus the river chose to then use that nice channel to go and drain. The Grand Canyon also is described on some stellae. Stellae are these, or stele, are these little tiny obelisks things that have writing on all four sides. And they were used as gnomon for solar observatories. They were used as place markers and all of this kind of stuff. I've got a book that is a reproduction of an old book by a sailor who talks about all these different kinds of boats all around the planet. This guy wrote the book maybe in the 1820s. And he talks about when he was a kid going with his dad to watch the stele in Los Angeles or in Louisiana in the Delta there get crated up and taken to what we now call the Smithsonian. And these things were between 9 and 20 feet high. They were stone. They had Egyptian, they were like Rosetta Stones. They had Egyptian Hermetic, not hieroglyphic, but Hermetic writing on one side and some other language on another, though at the time he didn't know what the other language was, but he watched them crate up several hundred of these out of the Delta area, this one particular Delta area, and was told at the time by his dad that, oh yeah, this is just a continuation of what they'd found in the previous century when they'd moved into this area. And so in the late 1700s, Revolutionary War time, the guys in the Louisiana Delta were finding these Egyptian classified objects. Now, if you call the Smithsonian today, and I've actually done this, it's cool, call the Smithsonian and ask them about, well, what'd you guys take out of the Grand Canyon, or where'd you put these stele, or any of this, they'll say, we've never been in the Grand Canyon, we've never picked up a single Egyptian artifact off of anywhere on the United States, out of North America, and they'll deny it all continuously. And yet we have constant records in newspapers naming people that actually worked there, that you can see that they worked there. They're named over time. You can see that they had 15-year careers there in the last century, and yet the Smithsonian says they never worked there. We've never had any record of them. Yep. So someone got it wrong.
It's like the Bob Lazar stuff. Well, we never heard of him. We don't know who that guy is. But he's showing on a tour of the place he used to work at.
Take him right out of history. Yeah. But all of these mounds, all of the giants in Catalina Island off of California, the giants that they found up in the Northwest, all of these kind of things are managed history because we're apparently not to know this sort of a deal. So the Grand Canyon is interesting in other ways, though, relative to our gold story, because there actually is a lot of discussion language in old hard copy pre-internet material about gold and the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon and all kinds of incidental things. Okay, so this is an incidental thing that comes to mind. There's two of them actually. One is the crash of the Aurora alien. All right, in Aurora. Yeah, okay, and it polluted a well. Okay, they stuck the body in a well, and people got really sick after that happened because the aquifer got polluted by whatever that alien was. And eventually the Smithsonian comes along, and they had to dig the whole well up to get the body out. And thereafter, people aren't sick anymore. Lo and behold, right? And they gather up all of the radioactive pieces of material, and people don't get sick anymore. If you look at some of the original material, like in the 70s, that was written in these little pulp fiction or pulp books about Aurora, you'll see continuous mentions between Aurora and the Grand Canyon, and yet they're not physically close to each other. The incidence is twofold in that whatever it was that caused the Aurora crash happened to that craft as it was transiting over the Grand Canyon. And this was noticed by the people in that region from Arizona onward. Okay, so or whichever way it was going. I can't remember whichever on that particular instance, whichever way it was going. But it shows up in newspapers that this incident happened at this particular time, and then you see in another newspaper that was written 5 days later that the Aurora crash happened, and they found this thing and they had to bury it, and it was all smushed up. And you see that it happened then that all occurred at the same time on that same night, and so there's something spooky going on relative to the Grand Canyon that way. Another thing that's kind of interesting is that there's this airship episode. Okay, all these German guys used to live in Bix's neighborhood. In the 1800s, they lived in Jamestown. They had all of these airships that were running up in the Sierra Nevadas in the Calaveras County region up there in the
it's a gold country.
Exactly, gold country, up in the gold country. Okay, and you had all these Germans that were up there as gold miners, even, and making money as gold miners, and it was a hotbed of activity. And these Germans were flying airships. Not dirigibles, not hot air balloons. They were maneuverable. They could be controlled. They used some kind of a gas. We don't know what it was to get lift. They had an energy source. We don't know what it was. There were a number of people involved with it. It went on for almost a decade. A number of people died in the process of doing these. One guy smashed into a cliffside with his airship, and it shut down the whole operation, okay, because it was such a big explosion that it drew too much attention, and so they abandoned it all. But during this period of time, there was the airship thing all over Southern California, where people in the middle of the night would see lights coming from the sky that would be beaming down on them, and hear people talking up there. And it was reported in newspapers in San Francisco and Oakland, and they could plot it from Cupertino on the way up the coast, and they knew that it was approximately 50 to 150 miles an hour it was proceeding at, and all of this. One of these buggers crashed in O'Neill's Gulch and scarred the side of O'Neill's Gulch, which is near Jamestown. And it scarred the side of the cliff, which may not even be there anymore. As a kid, I saw this because my mother's family comes from that area. They were gold miners, and they lived in a gold shack up in that region, had a mountain up there. But anyway, the relatives showed me this scar that was up there at the time. And it's like 200 feet up off the floor of the valley. And the local rumors are, oh yeah, that's where the airship blew up, and destroyed part of the cliff. Anyway, that airship, those Germans, were part of the Grand Canyon story because, once again, during the airship issues of the 1890s, there were two episodes where airships went from California, one of which went to Texas and landed, and had talked about having to land in the Grand Canyon and take water out of the Colorado River. And they reported this to the farmer that they were talking to when they landed on his property. Now, the interesting story about all of this is the farmer reported this to the newspaper after he had gotten back from a journey to Peru from Texas. Round trip took him 8 hours with these two guys, and he brought back stuff from Peru to prove it. He'd actually taken and spent gold dollars and bought stuff in Peru and brought it back in the 1800s and swore to everybody that he'd only been gone 8 hours and had talked about these people having to refuel their craft with water from the Colorado River, and that's why they stopped at his place in Texas. They'd had a leak and they needed more water, and he gave them water from his cattle thing, and got to talking, and one thing led to another, and they said, well, hey, you want to come with us? And he said, sure.
And this was all in the 1850s. I mean,
Correct.
Long before the Wright brothers.
Correct.
I am hoping one day when all this stuff falls apart and our government is exposed for what they are, we get to learn our real history, our past, all the things that have gone on that we were lied to about.
Yeah.
That would be a great day in my book.
No, that's going to be years. It's going to take you years.
The Vatican, though. Remember the Vatican thing get looted?
Yeah.
If that happens,
well, some of that's almost
be a lot coming out.
And there's almost it's really interesting, the imagery of that fire recently at the Vatican. Okay, is it a wide meme?
That had me spiked. Like, is this it? Is it going down? No, it's next door. Okay.
Yeah, but still, wide meme, because that's the kind of imagery that we'll be looking at when this thing goes down. And I've noticed in dealing with these time episodes that, just as I was saying, okay, so your body knows that in order for you to deal with particular emotions and stuff, you've got to go through that instance where you nearly saw your thumb off, okay? And so you got to get the stitchery, and you got to get involved with all those people, and that's how your karma is going to interrelate with them and cause this other stuff to happen, and that's the way the universe works. And so maybe we're in one of those episodes now, because as in our work, there's always these weird precursors that show up. So some memes are very narrowly focused, like the captain on the Costa Concordia with the blondes on boats,
Yep.
right? That was just precise. There was no flop on it. It happened like that. It was done. And now we're living with that aftermath, which showed up in the long-term data. Some of the stuff comes up in the data sets with a lot of the long-term data ahead of it. And those are usually the ones that are wide memes. And that was the one of the things with the Vatican, because it was that some of that meme is also shared with the holes in the ground in Maryland that get looted when people want to go after food and that kind of a deal during the chaotic period of time. So I actually suspect that we're actually in that period of time now. We've had the first little temporal marker for the Vatican issue, and it's merely a question of where will we be when it goes down, right? Where will we be when we learn that this has happened?
Is there anything that you have seen regarding North Korea and us? I mean, or is that just not? Is that kind of blocked out, or your boss not checking?
No, we have all kinds of data for North Korea, but not for the U.S. and military action and that kind of thing. Okay, so we can, at this point, insofar as a generalized assumption within the data sets, it appears as though the U.S. is no longer the planetary policeman, and that China will deal with this. Okay, and so the data sets have an instance of China having to shrug a shoulder in the direction of North Korea to get North Korea to calm down and to behave itself. And that's coming up in a little while. And in the process of China shrugging its shoulder, the whole balance of the world is going to change. The power balance is just going to change overnight. So thereafter, it would not even come up to question whether we might be allowed to go and attack North Korea. Make sense?
Meaning we will be able to after whatever happens, or no chance?
No, meaning that unless you ask
China.
permission first, right, you don't do shit.
Yeah, but so we could still ask permission and maybe get it.
I
mean,
probably won't need it by then.
See, you don't understand. So the way it works is this, though, dude. As the big kid on the block, you never, ever, ever allow that power to be delegated. Okay, so the United States has done that stupidly. Okay, we've delegated power to and the ability to use that kind of power to really doofus kind of people that have used it and abused it. And China won't behave that way. They've never behaved that way in their entire past. And their cultural training from Genghis Khan, it won't allow it. So I think after the North Korea episode, the data would have a situation arise over a weekend. It would have something occur on a Friday. It would say that there's going to be, shitloads of Chinese parachutists all over North Korea within hours. And that within hours of that occurring, it's done. It's over. And then there's a number of the hours in the rest of the weekend is the public face of what just occurred coming out. And then the rest of us have to deal with it from that point on.
Okay.
So we'll see. We'll see if that actually happens. If it does, it'll be coincident with the silver rocket. Okay, because that weekend and that sudden shift in power is also the point at which all of the data shows that, a lot of the manipulation slacks off. I don't want to say it ends, but it's like they're given a big hiccup or a big slap in the face, and then it takes them a minute to gain it again. And during that period of time, silver jumps up. And then we see the glimpse of it, and then we're all thrashing on them, and then they're fighting us all the way up, So I think it's going to be, I actually think that, I have personal confidence at a very personal level in some of these forecasts that the data sets are showing. And as a result of that, I'm trying to do my own house move issues now, even though I know all the pricing and everything is going to go to hell. Okay, at my age, I don't care. The issue is that basically the idea is I'll buy a house and I'll die there, so I don't have to worry about whether or not it sells. Right? Yeah. It's just not an issue. So I have a different criteria, but I do have to be aware of where I'm living and the conditions that are going on now. So, for instance, in my area, I need waterfront, but in order to feel safe, and I'm a paranoid, and that really is something for me. But the waterfront around here is all craggy and steep. It's not like where you live, Joe, where everything is flat. So 96 through 99, we had so much rain that 6 people died in the middle of the night as their houses slid into the sound or hillsides slid down on top of them. And we had $1 billion in damage, hundreds of millions at least, but billions in today's dollars. So I have to be careful where I buy, especially with all the seismic activity and that kind of stuff going on at the moment. And like Bix was asking, well, where do you decide to live? Well, here's the thing, Guy. That's why I put that money into the motorhome. I'm doing okay. We're successful. I'm a successful inventor, and at the same time, it's like I sort of want to save. I'm not very really luxury minded. I'm not motivated by money, but I thought, and I'm not really motivated by road trips. I hate them, to be honest.
Yeah.
The monotony of it all, right? But I was deciding that, well, with the seismic activity and everything else coming up, it would make sense if I had a motorhome sitting here, such that should my house get really hit hard or the electricity grids and everything go down, I'm instantly off grid and I'm able to continue without going through that suffering period. So to a certain extent, my motorhome is like my alternate second house. Now, a good part of this is that the government recognizes motorhomes as second homes, so you can write off any and all of your mortgage kind of and tax considerations. And if you use it as an office, you can write it off as an office. So, there's actually tax advantages to it. And if we end up having to live in it, well, hey, there's living advantages to it as well. Sure. And we've got that coming this August. And we've seen it already, the increasing seismic activity. And I know that we're going to get hit really hard by the eclipse because all the volcanoes are already going off. And that's a 2 or 3 month lead into the eclipse times. If you got volcanoes going off, you're going to have big earthquakes during that eclipse period. So, since we're on the path there of the eclipse going down across the nation, and it's going to hit New Madrid, and it'll actually be over Pensacola, I think.
When is it supposed to hit?
I'm not an astronomer. It's in August. I don't keep track of those dates for a real good reason, because I don't want them to influence my interpretation on data sets, right? Now, I'm really screwed, okay? I'll be flat out here. I'm really screwed by what these guys, Corey Good and David Wilcock and Jay Widener, have done to me, because I'm going to have to do a ton of cleanup on the data. And I was, in fact, cleaning up the data and straining my already damaged wrist that led to not being able to do any more Alta reports for a while. But another part of it is I've got to go through and clean up all my algorithms, reset all my triggers and stuff, because these guys are out there actively promoting a harvest the sheeple program, okay? They're spewing lies out there and fictions and telling everybody that they're truths and putting them in books and comic books and movies and all of this kind of stuff deliberately to make as much money as they can off of these people. And they intend at some point when it comes out that all of this is not true, to everybody's going to turn and point to Corey Good and say, he was the bad guy, we're just dupes. You can't blame us. We were taken in just like you were. We believed him just like you did. Yep. Okay, and there's going to be a lot of people that will then try and distance themselves from him. And if it gets that far, if it follows the Amy Semple McPherson thing, he'll get up to a certain point, and then the whole scheme will come undone, and somebody's going to end up dead or abducted or worse. And we'll see which way it goes. But the bastards have caused me all kinds of problems with my data sets, because now I've got to go through and redo all of the lexicon tuning I've done for the last year to back out all of the emotional tones that these guys have been pumping up, especially relative to all of my favorite subject, which is all the woo-woo, the UFO and all that kind of stuff.
So you got fake newsed.
I did. It polluted the data set. Yeah, and what polluted the data set was that I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, because it was so consistent that I kept having to tune it out. Well, it was consistent because it's a commercial enterprise, and they were all working on the same script, and they were resurrecting it month after month and adding to it and building it and so on. So no wonder I was fighting all of their crap. Usually I can filter this stuff out. A big movie's coming out, I can put tags on it because I know it's coming out of specific outlets and so on. What really got me on this was that it was so widespread. It was coming at me from all of these different contexts. And so it got to the point where I didn't know. I knew something was up, and then I started making tests. I actually, as I say, I put 3 instances in my data reports that I knew in a particular way would be attractive to this group. And sure enough, they piggybacked on all 3 of them. So I knew, all right.
Yeah, you set a trap. You trapped them.
I set a trap. They fell into it. Yep. Nice. I set a booby trap, and the 3 boobies fell into it. Yep.
Lovely.
So, but I got to deal with it. I don't know how long that'll take. But at the moment, it's kind of moot. Okay, guys, we've got a real hard year here. We've got a real hard year next year. The details simply don't matter anymore. We've got a little tiny brief opportunity to all of us convert our lives in a meaningful fashion. Okay, I cannot emphasize enough, unless you're a history buff, you won't appreciate the times we're in until 20 years from now. You guys will reflect on this time and say, damn, we lived through that. We were there. We saw this shit go down. And hopefully we profited, and now we're living like kings because of this, right?
Yeah.
Or now maybe we're just simply alive because of the stuff we did in this horrific time. Because it's going to get really rough. So it's kind of like one of those things. You've got the opportunity now to get access into the cryptos and get out of the dying dollar. You've got a little tiny opportunity to get the dollar and convert it to stuff you might need, 2x4s, gasoline for your car, tires, or whatever, right? And a lot of that will disappear over time as we go forward, as we get into these really nasty, brutal years. So my goal at this moment is to kind of make up for the emotional aspects that I've participated in with my bad silver forecasts. Okay, I've been the world's worst silver forecaster.
But the best Bitcoin and crypto forecaster I've ever
there
seen
you
in my
go.
life.
Okay, and there you go. See, once I tumbled to this, well, like I say, it was Ethereum. Once I looked at that code, it got me thinking about stuff in a different way. I went back and looked at the language relative to what I was seeing in the forums, had a new basis from which to interpret, and bang, we were right on from that point forward. And it will continue to go on until it just explodes, and then we won't care anymore. But we're in this brief period of time, this summer and through this fall, multi-millionaires will be made from mere handfuls of the dying dollars. It's going to be one of those times where 5 years from now, you'll see a book or the equivalent come on out where the guy says, why in 2017 I was so damn smart. I turned $3,000 into $155,000. And hey, I got people out there that are sending me emails now. By the time we get done here and I go back and reconnect to email, I might have another 150 emails I got to deal with. I get that many, probably 1,000 plus a day. But I've got
Thank
emails.
Thank you, emails saying I sent like 40 of them already. So
yeah,
I think everybody owes you a tip of the hat for your crypto calls, and I think very soon your silver calls. So bravo, Cliff. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased about the crypto stuff. It worked hard for that. And I'm very glad that everybody's able to profit. And some guys are doing spectacularly well. One guy actually has been able to turn $5,000 into well over $250,000. And he's done it in groups of doubling. And then another guy I know has taken and quadrupled his money in the last week, or in less than a week. So they've been able to actually do life-changing kind of things, like the woman that was pissing on the carpet, right? when her husband showed it. Well, you don't know the backstory to that. They've been living for like 6 years in a very small, less than 400 square foot trailer.
Not no more.
And so not anymore. Not anymore. That's the whole thing. It's like, she almost fell over just because they were out of it. He'd been able to end her misery with a significant risk. Okay, this guy took a whole week's worth of salary. And he was scared. He didn't tell her because if he'd bombed out on it, they would be in even worse misery, right? But something has changed time-wise, and like the real estate and all of that. We need to let Joe go, and you got to get back to your kid. You're going to have to bail him out from his, from the jail from being too drunk, watching heave in the back car.
Graduation, baby, graduation.
You got it. And
right.
hey, good luck to him.
Hang on one second.